Well, today I have a lovely guest, Penny Fox, and we're going to talk about what it is to be a solopreneur and in particular on starting, since this season's all about starting. And what I love about Penny is she strikes me as someone who really takes on learning and also is not afraid to get out there and put herself in front of others. I'm an introvert. I've said this before. I know it's hard to believe because I'm sitting here in front of a microphone talking, but my tendency is toward introversion, and I never really took to networking, going out and shaking hands and saying, "Hi, I'm Terry, I do this." And believe me, I've tried it and it just drains me. What I love about Penny is that she really put herself out there in a very creative way. In fact, I think that it's an approach that I never really thought of, but it really worked for her. She's been in business 26 years and she has evolved her business, and she's in a parallel business to my own where she does content creation now, but she started building websites, and I also build websites. It's one of those things where she and I could have gone off on this tangent about what it was like dealing in the early days of website development and just have some shop talk, and you would be completely lost. So be glad that we didn't do that. But anyway, it's a great conversation, and I think that her final two segments where I asked a couple questions about starting and mindset, and she just nailed both of them as far as what can really support you when you're starting your solopreneur business. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Miss Penny Fox. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. Well, here we have Penny Fox, and I am so glad that you're here to have a conversation about what it is to be a solopreneur and starting, which is the season theme that we're in the middle of. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about not only what you're doing today, but also some of the things that you encountered in your first year or two or three. You never know, right? Some of us take, for me, it took 5 years for me to get my sea legs with that. And sometimes, I get up and coming up on 20 years now, I'm like, I feel like I just started. And for my listener, just introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing today in your business.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited about this conversation. My name's Penny Fox, and I have been in business now for 26 years. So if anybody knows about being a solopreneur, it's this girl right here. And where my business is, I have moved into a space where I help small business owners and marketing managers with their content marketing. The riches is in the niches, as they all like to say. And so for me, it's about understanding your content and how to share that marketing message. And I mean everything with your content. I'm talking about email sequences, sales pages, not just your social media posts, but everything that you do to bring your message out there to connect with people and to hopefully convert them into customers.
Both Penny and I are kind of marketing centric. We're creatives. And so we're going to throw around some marketing lingo. So apologies for that if we do. But what I love about content marketing and just the power of it, it's a long tail marketing approach, meaning you have to get a lot of content out there repeatedly, consistently, that really reinforces your brand, but also solves problems for people. Because if they see that you're the one who knows how to solve these problems, they may just use your content and go self-solve, or they may be the kind of person that's like, wow, this person really knows what to do and I need help, and they'll jump in and do it. And inbound marketing is a form of marketing that is, it's not outbound is where you go and you bother people. You're like doing sales calls and you're like banging on their door and saying, hey, buy my stuff. Whereas inbound marketing is where you're creating consistent content, as I said, and then you're inviting them into a conversation, whether that's subscribing, whether that's downloading something, whether that's, just having a consult call with you. But it's all about getting you the help that you need, but using content that demonstrates your value and solves problems for your audience. So that's awesome. And I do a lot of that as well. So Penny and I are
Mm-hmm.
like, separated at birth kind of marketing people. And I love that what you're doing is you are addressing a very common problem and more so need in the marketplace. And I can't tell you, and I know you'll be over there nodding, saying, "Yeah, I know what you mean." Clients come to me and they just don't have any sense or ownership of creating a consistent strategy around content. And they think if they're just posting, like I just talked to somebody yesterday who has an incredible following, very well networked in a very niche industry, and he's just posting on LinkedIn, like, congrats, or here's somebody's looking for a
Yeah.
job. I'm going to this conference. So you can just
Mm-hmm.
tell there's no real strategy behind the posting. And the guy's got a great audience. He's so well known for what he does. And and I'm like sitting there going, there's such a missed opportunity here, but this is so common. Do you agree?
Yes. Oh, totally agree. I think one of my biggest things that I have these conversations with my clients all the time is somebody will talk to me about what their marketing message is, and I say, what's its purpose? What's the intent of this? Is it just so that you can say at the end of the week, I posted, yay? Because it has to be more than that. Why are we using our time, which is very valuable as a small business owner, our energy, which could be going towards working with clients? Why are we doing all this if there's no intent or purpose behind it? And when we think about it from that place of having intent and purpose, then that starts to deliver the idea of there needs to be a plan in place. There needs to be a strategy. And I always say to them, if we figure out what your goals are, is your goal to increase your sales? Is your goal to grow your email list? Is your goal to reach more customers? If we could start from that place of that goal, then we work backwards from it rather than just, hey, I'm at a conference. Why are you at that conference? I'm at that conference to learn some amazing things that my business can now help you solve that solution. That becomes the message, not, hey, I'm at a conference, which is cool. I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's not a cool thing,
Yeah, exactly.
but the intent and purpose also needs to be there.
Yeah, definitely. And what's interesting is some of the things you mentioned, like, are you trying to grow your email list? A lot of
Hmm.
those are the reverse engineering of that goal. So if
Right.
you're growing your list, well, what's the final outcome there? Well, it's obviously make more sales. So everything typically bottoms out at make more sales, get more
Yeah.
customers, drive more revenue into the business. And everything else is just a tactic. So
Correct.
understanding when you're doing your content marketing, not only having the strategy, but also measuring to see what's most effective. So anyway, I had a feeling that you and I would go off on these,
Yeah.
tangents about marketing and stuff. No, this is not a marketing episode.
It's not.
But here's the thing, I do want to try to remember to come back to this, Penny,
Yeah.
because I think we can provide some really valuable insights to marketing in that first year, marketing when you're
Right.
getting ready to start that business. So,
Totally.
speaking of starting,
Hmm.
give me a little bit of a story about what
Hmm.
made you start your own one person business and what was going on with, you and your life and everything that made you choose to create your own business versus get another job or buy a
Right.
franchise or do a partnership or whatever. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
options, obviously. So
Yeah,
tell
there
us,
is. There really
tell us
does.
how you got started.
Well, I can honestly say I got started at a time when small business owning was not a big thing, and especially for women. So I got a lot of kickback and pushback about you can't be starting your own business. You must be going to get a job someplace. You just don't want to tell us where you're working, because I was working in radio, and I had been working in radio for about 15 years at that point. Um, yes, I'm really only 25, and I started when I was 5. No, I'm kidding. Actually, you know what though? I do want to say I did start in radio when I was in college. I was a sophomore in college when I got my first job at a radio station. So that's why I was in for so long with radio. And I saw radio change and I saw it move into these corporate box store type of scenario. And I just knew that this just wasn't the place for me. It just wasn't the space for me. I learned at a certain point that my personality and the way that I like to do things and how I like to work does not include 3-hour meetings. And then once we all agree upon it, then we send it up to Atlanta to get approval, who has absolutely nothing or any idea about what we're doing in our own little marketplace. But yet they were the ones that were going to have to give us the answers. And it was just time and time like that again and again when I had to take a look at who I am and how I like to work. And it just wasn't it. And so I think that that's what propelled me into becoming a small business owner, understanding I can take control of a meeting. I can come up with an answer at the end of the meeting, and then we can implement it. So let's get to work and let's do things. And so having a small business got me into that space where I don't want to say, the word is coming in my head of control, but it's not so much control as it is understanding what my strengths were and what my weaknesses were at the time, and knowing that I could do better and do more if I trusted my instincts and went with my strengths. And that's what pushed me into starting my own business.
Interesting. And it's it's so funny because you have to have that distinction between the corporate experience and
Yes.
being a solopreneur to really see the contrast.
Mm-hmm.
And each has its benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And I choose the solopreneurship, as it sounds like you did as well, for just the sheer
Yes.
freedom of being able
Yes.
to solve the problems, to
Mm-hmm.
create a
Yeah.
methodology and a framework and an approach and treat your customers a very specific way. The other thing I love
Right.
about being a solopreneur is you are in direct contact with that
Yes.
customer and that client. And that is so powerful because any corporate job I ever had, I was so far removed from that
Mm-hmm.
end customer. And I'm very
Right.
customer experience focused in general, and I think you are too.
Yes,
So
completely.
it just empowers you to have that ability. And what's great about that is not only do you get to interact directly, but you get to see patterns and you get to really learn what your clients and customers want
Yeah.
and what their
Mhm.
life is really like. And that is so hugely valuable to anybody who's involved. I wish that corporations would figure out a way to put
Yes.
their entire workforce in front of the customer a lot more intimately. Now, there's
Mm-hmm.
probably some people in the workforce that they probably shouldn't do that, but
Yeah.
but anyway, well that's, that makes a lot of sense, and to me that strikes me as something incredibly brave that you took that on. And here's the thing, if you started in 2000 or thereabouts, the technology wasn't anywhere near what it is today. So it's almost as
No.
if you're going from one technology media into a completely different one. And so in doing that, you've got to skill up quite a bit. So
Yes.
talk to me about what you did to, first of all, choose that, or you might have been doing something a little bit different when you first
Mm-hmm.
started, and how
Right. Yeah.
that evolved and how you skilled up, because that's a really important component around being a solopreneur because you have to wear so many of these crazy hats.
Yes. Yes. Fortunately, I had a role in the corporation which enabled me to be very tech savvy. One of the things that I was doing was I was building websites for radio stations. And this is back when we were self taught HTML coding. So when I started my business, I had already gone through this process of understanding I needed to learn tech. So I wasn't shocked because when we left, the only thing that technical was about the work, I'd say, was emails
Hmm.
because there were no social media programs.
Yeah.
There was no
It was
TikTok.
such
There
a
was no
different
Twitter.
landscape. Yeah.
There was no short form videos, long form videos. None of that had even taken place. And so I think I had attuned myself to understand that for me to keep moving forward, I needed to always be aware of what was going on. Think about your skill set that you currently have. And even though the skill set may not directly translate, a skill set of somebody being a customer service, that is a great opportunity for you to be a small business owner because you are directly talking to the customers and you need that customer service skills. So for me it was understanding technology and knowing that I needed to keep learning to keep moving forward. And I don't ever feel like there was a moment where I stumbled and said, okay, this is going on and I don't know what's happening. It was always like, so this is going on, let me find out what's happening. And if that meant going to workshops, if that meant taking paid courses, if that meant going to a conference, so that I could sit and listen for days and take in all of that information and to be able to ask the questions and to interact with other business owners who were doing the things that I was doing. It's about understanding how we can take who we are and to do more with it. And so I think the technology for me, I just kept learning as each one came up. Social media. All right, let's figure out social media. I fortunately was in a space where when I started to work on social media, I had been moved from doing the website work into media buying, which is a whole other
Yeah,
story,
it is.
how I turned into that. But I was buying media. I was doing radio, cable, TV, billboards, magazines at the time. And so when social media first came out, I immediately took what I was doing with those media buying, understanding who the client is, understanding the demographics. What do they like? What are they doing? How can I talk to them? All of those things that we had to do with radio or TV or cable or whatever was the same thing I had to do with social media. So I just took it from that space of what do I already know, which was media buying, and I took how I could translate if I understood who the client was and I understood what their problems were and I understood what my business was the solution to their problem. It's just a different format. There was nothing different at that moment than me running a cable ad versus showing up on Facebook. It was the same messaging. At least back then it was at the time. Now algorithms have changed and things have all evolved into different areas. But that's where we went. And so I went from understanding the media buying world and taking all of that knowledge and taking all of that information and just thinking, well, marketing. It has to be another form of marketing. That's what social media is. And so I just sort of translated everything I'd been doing into my understanding of how marketing worked on social media.
That makes perfect sense. And you strike me, what I know about you, you strike me as someone who eagerly is interested in learning and expanding. And you're right, the creative field, especially now with AI and agentic work and
Mm-hmm.
everything, all the apps that are out there, we're having to
Right.
really scramble and make sure that we're keeping pace with the
Mm-hmm.
technology because our clients are demanding it, which makes perfect sense. What I wanted to ask you was in the beginning, as you were doing websites, and probably throughout maybe your first decade or so, how did you know? Because I get asked this a lot. How did you know how to price yourself? Because when I started, I did
Mm-hmm.
hourly rate. That was just what everybody did because I looked at
Yeah.
myself. It's kind of like a freelancer. And I'm like, well, I charge X dollars an hour, blah, blah, blah. So I don't do that anymore. And
Nope.
it's for very specific reasons. Thank you, Pia Silva. What were the basics that you went through when you were trying to decide how do I price as you're coming in and doing your own thing?
Oh, I did a crappy job. Let me just say, when I first got started, I did a crappy job. I would do things like, so I did the website. If I had to hire a programmer, I would make sure that, okay, if a programmer cost this much, then I had to back out that amount of money for the programmer. And what was my fee? You know, can I make a little bit of money? I was thinking about the client and how much they were going to pay and how much were they going to think about the value of it versus looking back at me and what my business needed to grow and to scale.
Yeah.
And so I did a really crappy job
Yeah, but that's
because,
understandable because, I
yeah,
mean, comparing both our stories, it's like
yeah,
you want to cover your expenses if you're subbing out, which is what
yep,
you were struggling with, and then really deciding, where do I fit competitively, right? I know
right.
that's what I did. I was like, well, what do other web designers
Yeah,
charge and stuff?
yeah, completely.
And what's interesting is now we know better, okay? And now we
Yeah,
we
yeah,
charge based on the value we deliver. So in other words, if we
right,
build someone a website, what's that website going to do for their business? Right?
right.
And that's, I mean, quantifiable in many terms. And looking at it from that perspective allows you to stand in a much more powerful place when you go to quote or create an
Hmm.
estimate for any client when
Hmm.
you're going and creating something tactical.
Right,
So you relied on programmers to some degree. You did a lot of it
right.
yourself. I did everything myself
Yeah.
and I just never took on doing heavy programming. It was just something
Hmm.
I'm like, that's not in my offering, if you will. And
Right,
so that
right.
allowed me to just keep things in-house, and then I could control the pricing.
Mhm, mhm,
But you're right. I mean, over
mhm.
deliver and undercharge, that was the beginning, and it's
Terrible.
okay. This is something I want to really stress. It is okay to take time figuring out your pricing. As
Right.
long as your finances, and I did a episode on this just a couple episodes ago, as long as your finances are the first and foremost thing that you're always staying on top of.
Right.
Because when you start in your business, you have to find clients, and it can take
Yeah.
a while if there's no awareness, or if your network
Mhm.
isn't set up to actually help you. And everybody's in a different situation. If you're doing something that you did when you were in corporate, it makes a lot of sense that that
Yeah.
corporate give you that launch. Like, I had a lot of clients come to me from Marriott, where I worked, and they were
Mhm.
getting laid off too. And they're like, "Oh, I'll start my own
Yeah.
business. Let's call Terry. She used to do this." So that's kind of how I got started. And then it was like, and then they told two friends and so on. So it's just amazing how it happens. And what I wanted to ask you, specific to your starting kind of mentality, when we're
Mhm.
looking at, okay, let's say your finances are what they are, you're kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, this is going to work. I'm going to really committed to
Mhm.
this. I'm moving forward. What were some of the things that you did to get the initial clients that you had in those early
Mm.
years in doing your business so you could actually keep going? I mean, 26 years, that's remarkable.
Networking. I do a lot of networking. Way before COVID, there was a lot of in-person networking. I also was very lucky in the sense that I can teach. So not only am I a business owner, I'm actually a amazing teacher. So I was fortunate enough that I partnered up with the SCORE. If your listeners are
Yep,
familiar with SCORE,
SBA, right?
yes, we have SCORE here in the Orlando area, and we are one of the few places, there's only two in the nation, that has a national entrepreneur center. Because I teamed up with SCORE, I started teaching there. So for about 10 years, I taught like 8, 10 classes a year.
Nice.
And they were small classes. I had this one class, was a 3-part class, and there was 15 people in the class because they wanted to keep it very small. And so I was with you for 3 weeks in a row. And so you know what happened after 3 weeks in a row of being with
Hello,
me in a
Penny. Could
room
you build my
and
site?
me teaching you something? I got clients.
Yeah, that's
And so
fantastic.
and so I want you to think about, when we think about the idea of networking and we think about the idea of how we're going to meet clients, again, my strengths. I looked to my strengths, which was teaching. And so I was able to find an opportunity like that, which put me in front of my potential clients. And so almost every class that I taught, I walked out of there with a stack of papers because I had them fill out a little survey. Do you want to join my email list? Do you want to do this? Do you want to get together on a call?
Hmm.
And it was a way for me to open the door and to introduce myself to people who I probably might not have ever reached had they not shown up to my classes. So it gave me an opportunity to expand the number of people that I was talking to,
That's
you know,
brilliant. That's
to tell them
brilliant.
about my business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think you mentioned that. I didn't know that
No.
you were affiliated with the incubator and stuff as
Oh
far as
yeah.
through UCF and the Small
I'm
Business
I'm
Development
still with them.
Council. Yeah, I know it all well. When I lived in
Hmm.
Orlando, I was very involved as
Yeah.
well. Very cool. We probably crossed paths and we didn't even know it.
You know what? I probably was teaching one day, and you walked right past
Yeah,
my class.
I
I went, "What's
probably.
going on in there?
Who's that chick in there? She looks pretty
Why is
cool.
she waving her hands around?" Why is she
What are some of the things? So if I have one of my audience members is listening and they want to do their own business, they're nervous about getting started, or they're in their first year and they're struggling, and they just need more confidence when they go to ask for business, or better ideas as far as like, how do I get out there and get business? And for some people, that's a real challenge, especially people who are
Yeah.
introverted. And
Hmm.
so what would be some of the, and use your own example if it did occur for you, but what are
Hmm.
some of the things that you could share from a guidance standpoint that they could do to help shore up that confidence and that esteem, knowing that they are fully capable and that they could really do well in their own business when they're starting?
Hmm. It is such a mental mindset thing. And so, because it's a mental mindset thing, and this is one of the things that I talk about a lot, if we've trained ourselves to think this about ourselves, that who am I to teach this, or who am I to share, who am I to even offer this for you in my business, we can unteach this. We can unlearn this as well. And one of the biggest things that I have learned from all of the years, especially those first couple of years, is to accept the fact that I am not for everybody. And that's perfectly fine. I am not the answer for everybody. I'm not the business for everybody. I'm not the solution for everybody. And if we go into this knowing that, when we hear a no, when we're here I'll get back to you, or we get ghosted, we don't take it personally, because we know that it's not so much us. It's the situation. It could be the budget. It could be the timing. It could have 20,000 things that have absolutely nothing to do with us. And we need to learn how to not internalize this. And so, where that comes from is repetitive over and over and over again. If you tell yourself, I'm going to make 10 sales calls today, and out of these 10 sales calls today, if I can just get one person to say hello back to me, that's a win. And it could be something as simple as you said hello back to me. That's a win. And then when we start to take those wins over and over and over again, and we start to feel it, that's when the mind starts to shift. And we no longer are thinking, I'm not here. Who am I to do this? Imposter syndrome creeping into us. And let me just say, 26 years in the business, I still get imposter syndrome. I still get those feelings of, who am I to tell you how to do this? And like, wait a minute. Yeah, who am I to tell you this? Yeah, I've only been doing this for 15 years. Yeah, that's why I'm here to tell you who to do this. But I still catch myself.
Yeah.
And then I have to have these conversations in my head. And sometimes I have these conversations out loud, to the point that my son would say, are you talking to me, or are you talking to the dog? I'm talking to myself, actually. But I think what happens is we just need the repetition. The more you do something, the easier it gets. And the more you hear no, the more you hear I'll do this later, the more that you listen to these words and you don't internalize it, that's what keeps you moving forward. Because you know it's going to happen. You know that it's going to happen. And find ways to celebrate small wins.
Yeah.
Like I just said, if you talk to 10 people and one person just said hello, if that's a win, take the win. Take the lap, take the whim, enjoy it, take the W. And that starts to unlearn that negativity. That helps to relearn it. And when we can start to associate this in a different way, I think that helps a lot. But it's right here. It's all this stuff we have going on up here that we need to get control over, because we are ourselves controlling everything that's going on here.
Wow. That's beautiful. I have nothing to add to that. I think that's brilliant. And it's so true. So let's finish with one quick word of advice. So if we have a listener that's pondering starting their own business, what is the one choice piece of advice that you would like to share with them?
Okay. I say be open to opportunities, because I went into my business as a website developer, and now I'm doing content marketing. And I went from website to media buying to marketing consultant to content marketing. And I kept my eyes open on opportunities. So don't think, because, oh, I can't do this. That's not me. What if you did take a class? What if you did get trained? What if you went to the conference and you realize, I do have the skill set to do this? Take opportunities and find ways to make them yours. Because when you first start your business, you're not married to this. You're not married to this concept. You're not married to this idea. And that's the beauty of having your own business. I get to decide how this business works, because it's my business. And I get to think about who I want to work with and how I want to help them and all the solutions that I can solve for them, right? But I couldn't do that without looking at all the opportunities. And so sometimes things will come up to you and you immediately think, oh, that's not me.
Yeah.
As opposed to, what if you leaned in and thought, how could I make that something that could be me? It may not be exactly what this person's doing or that person's doing, but what if I turned it around and turned it into something that made it more authentic to me? and my business and how I want to run my business and how I want to help my clients. So I would say, word of advice, be open to opportunities and thinking about how you're going to grow your business and how you're going to run your business and to make it true to you.
I love that because it really propels you to draw out your passion. And I think
Yes.
that that's something that I've discovered in the last, I'd say, maybe 5, 6 years or so. What I discovered was like, okay, I don't have to keep doing this stuff over here if I'm not passionate about it. And I remember making
Right.
a list on a whiteboard saying, all right, what are the things that
Hmm.
I didn't like about my business
Yeah.
before COVID? And then what are the things that I did like? And I felt really strongly about just a few things. One of them was
Hmm.
doing the coaching, another was strategy and things like that. And I'm like, so my business is so much more focused on that. Do I still do the tactical work? Of course I do, because I still enjoy it. But I was able to kind of evolve my focus
Hmm.
and just reaffirm and regenerate my passion for what I did. And I think that what you just
Hmm.
offered about being open to opportunities, the universe is always showing us a new
Yes.
pathway because we're kind of craving something that we might not be fully conscious of. And I
Right.
think paying attention to those signs along the way, being open
Hmm.
to opportunities, as you say, is incredibly valuable for the entire lifespan of being in business, whether you're starting or
Yes.
whether you're in your 20th year. Penny, it's
Right.
been such a treat talking with you. I love all the
Thank you.
nuggets that you shared for my listener on starting and being a solopreneur. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me today.
Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt if this episode had a prompt and you get that homework done because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one.